And joining us now is someone who's no stranger to Middle East peacemaking, Ambassador Dennis Ross, a former Middle East peace negotiator and special assistant to President Obama, now a distinguished fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. And he joins us from Washington, D.C. And Ambassador Ross, you also are no stranger to White House signing ceremonies for Mideast peace, though it's been quite a while. So your impressions, even your emotions at that event yesterday at the White House?
Look, my impression is that we've crossed an important psychological threshold in the region. And I say that because we've now seen that other Arab states, although they're small and though they don't have a border with Israel, and though they've never been in a state of war with Israel, and they've never fought a war with Israel, they no longer feel that they have to deny themselves the pursuit of what's in their interest because of the Palestinian issue. It doesn't mean they're disregarding the Palestinian issue, but they're not allowing the Palestinians to hold the region hostage to anything that depends on what the Palestinians do. That's a tremendous development, and what it reflects is other states in the region are prepared to pursue their national interests in the face of what are increasing sets of challenges that are increasingly challenges to their ability to deliver for their own publics. Challenges that relate to health, especially with COVID-19. Challenges that relate to climate and drought and water problems. Challenges that relate to food security. You look across a whole variety of different sectors and challenges, and Israel can be of help. And these are countries that are saying, we're not going to deny ourselves that. And I think that, for me, that was, an important threshold to be crossed. Did this carry the same kind of emotion that existed back in September 13th, 1993? No, because it was very different. It was very different from the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty. It was very different from the Jordanian-Israeli peace treaty, because those had been countries that had been at war with Israel and had fought wars with Israel. It wasn't the same as the breakthrough, as I said, on September 13th, 1993, with Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat. No, because here you have two national movements that had denied each other a reality. They are two national movements competing for the same space. It was an existential conflict. So what you see, in a sense, with these other conflicts, they were characterized by, in a sense, mutual denial and kind of being in a state of war. This was very different because these were two countries that weren't in a state of war, might have been boycotting Israel, but the truth is, over the last decade, they had been developing quiet relations with Israel. So a threshold has been crossed, but did it carry the same weight of emotion that we saw in past ceremonies? For me, no, that didn't diminish in any way its importance.
Right. Now, you mentioned the Palestinians, that they were not completely forgotten yesterday. But I want to look at the specific text in the treaty between Israel and the UAE. It says at one point, recalling the treaties of peace between the State of Israel and the Arab Republic of Egypt, and between the State of Israel and the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, and committed to working together to realize a negotiated solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that meets the legitimate needs and aspirations of both peoples, and to advance a comprehensive Mideast peace, stability, and prosperity. The Bahrain agreement had similar language, as just solution. But Dennis, something is missing there in that text, and that is a reference to a Palestinian state or a two-state solution. Are you surprised that it's not there, that the UAE and Bahrain didn't want to see that or didn't insist on it being there?
I think they felt that they needed to put in these documents a reference to the Palestinians. They didn't need to put in the document a recitation of past resolutions. So I think they felt they met their obligation, and I think they feel a degree of obligation that they don't want to be seen as completely forsaking the Palestinian cause. So they made a reference to it, but they weren't going to get into anything except broad generalities. And part of that, I have to say, is probably also driven by the way the Palestinian Authority and Hamas have reacted to what they've done. Their impulse to somehow do more in terms of language probably influenced at least in part by that. But also, I suspect, they felt as long as we make a reference to it, that's sufficient.
Right. Now, you are the co-author of a book called Be Strong and of Good Courage, How Israel's Most Important Leaders Shaped Its Destiny. I want to ask you, Prime Minister Netanyahu today was actually nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by an Italian member of parliament. I want to ask if you think he deserves it. But maybe a bigger question is how much credit historically Prime Minister Netanyahu deserves. He says this agreement justifies his approach to peacemaking. He calls it peace for peace.
Well, I don't think you can call it peace for peace because these two states don't have a border with Israel. There was no territory that was at issue for them. And I would say you have to be careful about calling it peace for peace because there was a linkage that was created. There would have been no normalization with the UAE or, for that matter, Bahrain if there had been Israeli annexation of the territories allotted to it in the Trump peace plan. So that actually does relate to territory. So I think you have to be careful about saying it's peace for peace. Having said that, I think Prime Minister Netanyahu deserves credit in the sense that he has quietly built relations with a number of Arab states over the years. I've said, look in the book you cite, one of the things we say is that when it comes to dealing with the Arabs, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been strategic, no question. When it comes to dealing with the Palestinians, he's been much more political. He has been attuned to his base, and his base, in many respects, kind of defined the boundaries of what he was prepared to do. But that doesn't diminish, in a sense, something that he's also arguing. What he's really arguing is less the peace for peace, and he's really arguing that those who said that my approach would lead to the isolation of Israel have been proven wrong, not only internationally, but in the region. That's the good news for what Prime Minister Netanyahu has said. It'll be bad news if there is a sentiment that's saying the Palestinians have lost and we've won. Because if that becomes the case, Palestinians will basically say, fine, one state, one binational state. And the one thing that Israel still has to contend with, even if you develop peace with your neighbors, which is important, you still have to contend with the reality that the Palestinians aren't going anywhere.
Right. We're going to have to leave it at, Ambassador Ross, we'll have to leave it at that point. Ambassador Dennis Ross, thank you for joining us tonight.